In this exercise, we're going to talk about how to improve the introductions to your essays. And in doing so, we're going to talk about just generally good writing habits, things that'll help throughout your essay. But the reason that the introduction is so important is it sets the tone for the rest of your essay. And if your introduction is all over the place, then your essay is going to be all over the place. So there are some good habits that you kind of need to start early on so that they carry throughout the rest of your essay. And there's lots of things that we've learned over the years about how to, get into an essay, how to write an introduction, and some of them are helpful, some of them are not. And I'm going to hopefully show you how to take that good advice and use it in a good way, because sometimes it gets misapplied. But also the main thing to always remember is that the point of an introduction is to introduce the reader to whatever you're about to say. So your thesis is the most important part of this, right? You need to make sure it is clear where the rest of this is going. And that's especially true for standardized test essays, things where you don't have a lot of time or space to get your point across. You need to make it very clear early on what you're about to argue. So you don't want to spend a long time rambling and ramping up to your introduction thesis. You just really need to get to the point. So looking at these examples, this first one actually does a pretty good job of getting to the point. I do not think that schools should have uniforms. They hurt creativity and do not actually reduce bullying. So maybe there'd be more to that intro. It'd have more of in context, but this is basically a thesis. I know what this person is going to argue. I have no problem with what's going to come next. I know what to expect. Now, the thing that people point out is that it starts with the word I, which we have been taught not to use in essays. It's considered informal. It's just kind of considered bad form. Personally, I would rather see the word I or me and actually have a clear idea of what the person is going to argue than some weird rambling sentence that tries to fix this. And most often what we do to try to fix it is use the word one, a word that we never really use in this way in normal conversation. So what some people would do here is something like, one must agree that schools should not have uniforms. Or one could argue that schools should not have uniforms. Or one will see that schools should not have uniforms. It's so weird. I can't even come up with a sentence about it because it just feels so unnatural. But you write it because you've been just drilled that this word I needs to be avoided at all costs. Well, I don't think that's great advice, but also there's usually a much easier fix. And it's just to state your opinion as if it's a fact, right? We don't need sentences or phrases like I think, I believe. We can just get rid of them and make that our opinion just by writing it without having to draw attention to the fact that it's our opinion, right? So schools should, in this case, not have uniforms, right? Just by rearranging things a little bit, dropping the I, we're still making the same point. Your reader knows that it's your opinion, but we've kind of strengthened it by just stating it as if it's true. And we'll use the rest of the essay, the body paragraphs, to support that, but it's our argument, it's our thesis, and we don't need to kind of get wishy-washy with it by saying, I think, I believe. We can just get into our point of view. So how might we kind of rewrite this whole sentence? Let's see here. There's a couple ways to do it. There's not just one way. But what I would say is something like kind of what I've written here. Schools should not have uniforms. And now as we do stuff like that and we trim away some of these kind of unnecessary phrases, that means also we can start to combine sentences, and this could really just become one sentence. Schools should not have uniforms because they hurt creativity and do not actually reduce bullying. There you go. And maybe we can even add a little bit more and get some more specifics in our intro. But as far as accomplishing our goals, we've done what we're supposed to do here. We have made it clear what we're arguing, and the rest of our essay is going to do that. So that's pretty good, and we've fixed some minor things very easily. Number 2 here, this makes a big mistake that I see a lot as well. The issue of the Electoral College is complex. Some believe that it's necessary to protect the rights of smaller states. Others think that it's unfair because the person with the most votes won't always win. This hurts all voters because it undermines the idea of democracy. All of that is true, but I have no idea what this person believes. I have no idea what this argument is about to be. And most of the time that you're going to see an essay like this, it's going to be like the task will be to take a position on the Electoral College. And so what is the position? That it's complex? That's not a position. So these kinds of phrases creep into people's writing because they're kind of afraid to take a position, or they feel like they need to both sides everything. No, that's not your task. Your task is usually to argue your side. So make your argument very clear. We still may need to acknowledge a counter-argument. That's okay. But you have to make it clear that that's not your argument, that's someone else's, and then you're going to refute that counter-argument, right? So right now I'm kind of getting the sense that the Electoral College is bad. That seems like what this person is trying to argue. It's not great that I have to kind of make that assumption. Your reader should not have to guess what you're arguing. It should be clear. But let's see, how might we improve this? So I would want to make it really clear right up front what's going on. So we might need some sort of introductory sentence, but I think we can kind of just get to it. The Electoral College undermines democracy. Right? No, it's no wishy-washy, complex, multiple sides is, part of this issue. This is just getting to the core of it right away. Now, I could also elaborate here. Something like, let's get that because in there, because it allows the person with the most votes to still lose the election, right? So why does it undermine democracy? Well, I'm kind of already answering that, and maybe one of my body paragraphs will go into more detail about historical situations where this has happened, where the person with fewer votes has still won the election. And I can still acknowledge the counter-argument in my intro, especially if the essay question wants me to talk about a counter-argument. So I could say something like, while some argue that the Electoral College protects the rights of smaller states, it actually infringes on the rights of voters. There you go. Right? So not only, if I am going to acknowledge the other side, if I am going to acknowledge the complexity of the issue, I'm going to do it in a way that still makes it really clear what I think. Right? I don't want the reader to have to guess, and I don't think the reader is going to come away from this version of the introduction unsure of where the rest of this essay is going. We will acknowledge other points of view, but only to make sure that we strengthen my own point of view. Okay, that's what a counter-argument is supposed to do. You acknowledge the other side so that you can strengthen your own side. We don't want to give other people credit. Number 3. Oh, I hate when people do this. These are all like my pet peeves, so you might notice that, yeah, these kinds of things make me angry. So George Orwell's 1984 is a dystopian novel, one that many people read in high school. In this essay, we will consider Orwell's predictions and whether they came true. In this essay, we will consider, okay, you're not given a college lecture, okay? There's no we here. That's the personal pronouns thing again, and that's kind of why it's bad. It's weird. It's you. You are talking. So all these personal pronouns, sometimes like in number 1, they make it clear what you think, but they're still kind of considered informal, and they weaken your argument because you're just stating it as an opinion and not as a fact. Here it weakens your argument because it's your argument, not our argument. It's yours. Own it, right? Take ownership of that. Plus, I don't really know what the predictions are and whether they came true, so this is a very kind of, I don't know, vague introduction. I wouldn't know where the rest of this essay is going. It would be much better if I could kind of give a shorthand of some of those examples in this intro. So I don't know what this person's arguing. It's kind of like number 2, kind of vague. So what might we do to improve this? Well, we can say something like, first of all, let's kind of, this first sentence doesn't really do anything here. So let's just, if you really want to say, in the dystopian novel 1984, George Orwell predicted many things that came true, including name the things. Right? So it's not poetry. Things is not my favorite word to kind of throw into a thesis statement, but for a quick edit, this is certainly going to be better. It's making it clear that many of those things that you're about to argue which of the things came true, and you can even have another sentence, about things that didn't come true. And so that can also fit into your introduction in some way. You're separating things out, and it's going to be clear where you are throwing all these different pieces of the book and what you think is true and what is not. So make it clear what you think. All right, number 4 is doing, what we are also taught to do. It's including a hook. Have you ever seen a commercial for a Big Mac and immediately wanted one? That's the power of advertising. For this reason, there should be a ban on fast food commercials on children's television channels. Well, this does a lot of good things. We've got a thesis, and we've got a hook that kind of is fairly interesting. I don't think this is a bad hook. But the connection between them is iffy, right? So I see a Big Mac commercial, I want one, and now we're going to ban those commercials on television for kids? That seems like a leap. And I think that this is what happens sometimes when we really get in our heads that we need to have a good opening line, is we kind of like throw it out there and then just move on as if nothing happened and continue with the other parts of our checklist of what needs to be in an intro. So if you're going to have an opening line, you got to make sure it fits in with your opening argument, right? These things need to be together. And so if you're just throwing me a random rhetorical question, Winston Churchill quote, whatever it may be, you gotta make sure it's relevant to what you're saying. So I think we could fix this here. I think that we can do a lot of good. And I guess this is the phrase where we're gonna work on, right? For this reason, right? That needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So let's see, what can we do? Well, let's keep all the same. Let me just let's just talk really about what we're going to insert here. Have you ever seen a commercial for a Big Mac and immediately wanted one? That's the power of advertising. Okay, while adults have the willpower to resist this urge, children have not yet learned to control themselves sufficiently. For this reason, ... there should be a ban on fast food commercials on children's television channels. So, to be clear, this sentence, it's going to kind of just go right after the hook, right in here. And it's a connector sentence. It makes it clear why this hook is actually supporting my argument. And I think then that's why a hook is sometimes good, is it can get your argument going right from the first sentence. That's good. But if it feels just like this hanger-on, then cut it. Just get to your point. You really just want to make sure that your reader knows where things are going as quickly as possible. Okay, number 5, another one of my pet peeves. Because of the myriad health benefits and the way that it helps commence the establishment of other healthy habits, one should implement a regular fitness program into their daily routine. This is a disaster of a sentence. A lot of you read this and it sounds really, really smart. But someone who's really, really smart reads this and has no idea what it even means. They can guess, but this is not English. This is what if you had to ask an AI computer to kind of produce a sentence, this is what it would come up with. This is nonsense. So first and foremost, that word myriad bothers me. It's not a word that you ever use in real life. It does not mean what you think it means. It means, you think it means many, but especially in our thesis, we really want to make sure that we're being precise. And myriad means infinite or uncountably numerous, right? So because of the infinite health benefits, well, it's an exaggeration. It's not infinite. And it may seem like I'm splitting hairs here. But again, your intro sets the tone for the rest of your essay. And so if you're trying to, squeeze as many fancy words into your intro as you can just for the sake of sounding smart, the rest of your essay is not going to read well either because it's going to sound smart, you think it will, but the content will be lacking. This is not how you make your point effectively. Make your point clearly, and that's going to be better than making your point in a clever way. So it also gets a little tripped up on itself, commence the establishment. Doesn't commence and establish kind of mean the same thing? We've got that word one, and yet we switch, right? One is a singular verb, a singular noun, right? It refers to one person, but there is plural. So this is the problem with that word one, is it often accidentally makes us switch, and that's not good. We need to have consistency. So look, we can clean this up by using simpler language to make sure that our reader understands what we're trying to say. So what can we do here? I'm really just going to clean this up. The language is the problem. Okay. First of all, let's start with what we're really arguing. Implementing a regular fitness program into their daily routine. Well, isn't a regular fitness program something you do daily? I don't think we need to repeat that. Provides, and here we go. Let's already kind of just start off fixing a word myriad with numerous health benefits, and commences the establishment, helps to establish other healthy habits. I think these two sentences basically say the same thing. I think the only difference is that the second one is clearer, uses simpler words, more clear language, and like I said, clarity is better than cleverness. You really want to make sure you are getting your point across right away. You can be clever in the body paragraphs, because once your reader knows what you're arguing, if they miss something because you used a weird word or whatever, that's okay. They'll still kind of get the gist of what you're saying, and they'll know what you meant. But if your thesis is unclear, they're going to spend the next couple lines at least trying to guess what you meant, and you really don't want your reader to ever have to guess what you're saying. In exercise 2, I'm giving you much more of an introduction, right? So in exercise 1, those might have been little segments. Now we've got kind of a more substantial intro, and we have the task. So we can see, did the person accomplish what they're supposed to accomplish? So in this first piece here, write an essay in which you explain how Paul Bogard builds an argument to persuade his audience that natural darkness should be preserved. This is what we might call an analysis essay, right? Your opinion is not really relevant. So you need to analyze someone else's argument and say how their argument kind of is put together and why it is effective. So look at what happens, though, in this person's intro. Light pollution is a serious problem. Sounds like their opinion. It is also a relatively new problem. Until the 20th century, the night sky was perpetually radiant with stars. All one had to do was look up to see distant worlds with the naked eye. Nowadays, modern technologies keep cities and towns illuminated throughout the night. This is a serious problem. Rambling, redundant. Humans require the hormone melatonin to maintain our bodies. Staying awake reduces melatonin, which has been shown to cause health problems. Animals also use darkness to navigate and hunt for prey. In his article, Let There Be Dark, Paul Bogard successfully argues that light pollution should be reduced. So finally, we get to the task in the last sentence of this rambling introduction. And that's not good, right? We don't need it to be the first sentence, but we want it to be kind of near the top. But more important than that, notice, we're not actually saying what Bogard does to build his argument, right? We just get from this student that Bogard successfully argues. How? Why is it successful? What makes it successful? Maybe this melatonin thing is one of the reasons. Maybe the animals thing is one of the reasons it's successful. I don't know, but as your reader, I really should know. All right, that's your job, is to communicate that to me so that I don't have to guess what's going on. So we've got a couple problems here. Like I said, there's some cosmetic things, maybe like some redundancies, but this seems to be a little too heavy on this student's opinion and not some analysis of Bogard's opinion. And my prediction then is that the rest of this essay is just going to be a lot of kind of random facts and it's not going to stay on task. It's not going to analyze Bogaard's article. It's going to just talk about light pollution, and that's not the task. So what can we do to improve it? Well, we could also maybe get rid of some of this filler here. It's a matter of opinion. Maybe that's a good hook, right? Until the 20th century, the night sky was perpetually radiant with stars. So my personal preference here, I would get rid of this to start. It is also a relatively new problem. I kind of get rid of that. And just start with something like, until the 20th century, the night sky was perpetually radiant with stars. All one had to do was look up to see distant worlds with the naked eye. Then, let's highlight this. I would take this piece and put it kind of right in here. Right here. I don't care that you think it's a serious problem. You could say, in his article, Let There Be Dark, Paul Bogaard successfully argues that light pollution should be reduced. And we could even add that part. Light pollution should be reduced because it's a serious problem. This is okay. We can do this. Then when we talk about these things here, when we talk about the melatonin and the animals, you can say Bogaard talks about these things, right? Bogaard makes the argument about animals. Bogaard makes the argument about melatonin, right? And there's some rhetorical devices I'm sure that we could use. I don't have the article. It doesn't really matter what the specifics are. The point is, whatever they are, whatever you're going to argue, you got to make sure you're referencing it in that intro. You want your reader to know what you're going to say in the rest of that essay. This intro does not do that. I'm left guessing where we're going. And that's not good. So stay on task. Your intro should kind of be a very short answer to the first question. You're going to keep answering it in more detail in the body paragraphs, but that intro should be kind of like the shorthand answer to the question. You should not have your reader guessing. Number 2 is a different kind of essay. Today, in preparation for the city council meeting, you will write a multi-paragraph argumentative essay in which you take a stance on the topic of fare free public transit. Make sure you establish an argumentative claim, address potential counter-arguments, that's important, and support your claim from the sources you've read. So this would be more of a synthesis kind of essay, where yes, you need to provide your own opinion, but it's not coming from nowhere. You have source material and you need to cite those sources. So you've got to make sure you accomplish that as you go through. So let's look at how this person does this. On December 5th, 1955, an ordinary public bus became center stage for one of the most significant events in American history. Rosa Parks heroically refused to give up her bus seat to a white man in segregated Alabama. The rest is history. Today, public transit is an important part of everyday life. What? What? Why are we talking about Rosa Parks? What does it do with anything? Nothing. This is a hook gone wrong, right? That's what has happened here. This is why the hook, that idea that you need a hook all the time, can be bad. You just throw some random thing in there. You think it sounds profound and inspirational, but it has nothing to do with what you're talking about. If you're going to have an opening line, some sort of hook, it's got to relate to your overall point. This is just random, right? I have nothing about fare-free public transit based on this Rosa Parks story. Let's continue. Today, public transit is an important part of everyday life. Millions of Americans commute by buses, trains, and subways every single day. All right, seems a little bit more on target. Despite this, many cities are struggling to maintain their transit systems. Okay. Some may think that this means ticket prices should be raised. That sounds like a counter-argument. Right, so okay. However, if one considers the burden of higher fares on low-income commuters, one will realize, see, this is why I hate that word, one. If one considers the burden of higher fares on low-income commuters, one will realize that fare-free public transit is superior. So is that what you're arguing? Or is that what someone else is arguing? This is the problem with that word one. It just removes you from the situation, and I don't know who we're talking about. because we talked about some may think ticket prices should be raised. However, now someone else is arguing the opposite. What's your thesis? What are you arguing? Okay, now we have a random quote. Removing transit fares also reduces commuting times by alleviating one of the major friction points in the system, fare collection. So Rodriguez, I guess, is the source making that point. For these reasons, the city council should vote for fare-free public transit. Oh my gosh. Here's your thesis. Last sentence in this long, rambling, all over the place kind of introduction. Does not need to be the first sentence. But I shouldn't be held in suspense this entire time wondering, oh, what does this person think? What is this author going to say? It shouldn't be that hard to know what you are going to argue. Okay? So if you're going to bring in a counter argument, that's fine. It's probably safer to bring in the counter argument after the thesis, make it clear what you're going to argue, and then say why other people might be wrong. It's not, you don't have to do that. It's just, whatever you choose, you want to make sure it's really, really clear. The quote is another problem. That might be an excellent quote, and we might want to use that later on. But to kind of just throw this random piece of evidence into your introduction feels out of place. This feels more like something that would go in a body paragraph. And even if it were, I don't know that I'd want just a random sentence, right? Quoting something does not support your argument the way, it's not automatically going to support your argument, right? You need to explain how the quote does that. And so that's why we'll talk about this when we talk about body paragraphs. You really don't want to just plop an entire sentence into your writing. When you use a quote, you want to pick and choose and kind of weave the quotation into your own thoughts. So that way it's really clear why you're using the quotation. It's really clear how that supports your point of view. So there's probably a better way to do this. Maybe something like, if we start with the thesis, the city should vote for fare-free public transit. For one, according to research done by Rodriguez, removing transit fares, quote, reduces commuting times. It's one way. I don't know. It's just something here needs to be in the voice of the student writing this essay, and not in Rodriguez's voice randomly in the introduction. So there's a lot of good stuff here. There's a lot of bad stuff too. Even this beginning part, today public transit is an important part of everyday life. It's kind of a vague, platitude. Sure, that's true, but is it really helpful? I don't know. But if it helps you get into your point of view, that's okay, I guess. The point is, if you're really going to spend time in your intro making sure that it's perfect, the place to do that is in the thesis. Make it clear what you are about to say so your reader does not need to guess at it. Do not leave it till the end. Try to build suspense about what you're about to say. It's not a movie, it's an essay. You've got to make it clear up front what's going to happen. So both of these intros are not terrible, but they definitely could use some improvement. And hopefully we've talked about a lot of different ways that you can start to incorporate, this advice into your own writing. Because if you do write a solid introduction, I promise you that will trickle down into the rest of your body paragraph. So a clear intro is not just helpful for your reader to follow what you're going to argue, but it's helpful for you to follow. Because then you know what, I got to stay on task. I've got to argue this thesis throughout. And so if you're debating to whether or not to include some evidence, you've already made it clear in your intro what you're arguing. And you can always look back to that and see, is this really part of my argument? And if you're writing an untimed essay, something in school where you can edit and you have plenty of time, then your intro might even be the last thing that you write, because you have your argument in the body paragraphs, and then your intro is kind of like a summary of that. So you've got a lot of options if it's an untimed essay, but the key in every case is that it really needs to be clear, because it sets the tone for the rest of the essay, and it really helps your reader understand what you're doing, and you don't want them guessing. So take your time with it, and you'll have a better essay overall.